It is great to be back with you at the Black Hole of Real Estate podcast. And today I want to talk about what's changed um, in the last year or so and just maybe just stack it and rack a little bit for everybody because there's quite a bit of change in the market, yet it's not all that different. And we can certainly talk about the number of homes that have sold in the last year compared to last year, and it's less. And we can talk about the inventory being a little bit more, but not supersized by any stretch of imagination. And of course, inflation and interest rates are just much higher. What we can also talk about is, in the majority of areas, pricing is about the same as last year, and not much changes. You will see some deals where properties are selling below the list price, and one might argue that those list prices were super high, and they were on the market for a long time before an offer came in that the seller finally said yes to. And that's not unlike markets from 10 years ago. And when we look at some of the dynamics of 2023, there's a lot of similarities to 2012 and 2013, and there's lessons in that. We could take a lot of those and push it forward and say that in this market, the rates are actually now a little bit higher than they were in some of the boom years, the early 2000s. You saw rates between 6 and 7 throughout, and the market really ran hot. And then we've seen where rates were suppressed artificially to super low rates to try to stimulate economies and things, and rates in the 2s and 3s, which never seemed reasonable or right if they were there. And it's my suspicion that if you look back over history, the recent history, 20, 30, 40 years, rates between 5 and 8% markets really worked pretty well. It's just that we've become accustomed to markets running at 2, 3s, and 4s of interest rates, so it's a little different this time around, but I believe over time things will normalize into these rates, and I do believe that they'll soften a little bit. And I've been feeling all along it would be November, and maybe November they soften a little bit, but we could be pushing into next year. There's been some delays in that relief. The inflation really has not been tamed yet, and it's surprising with the number of raises that they couldn't do more with all of that energy. But I believe it is right sizing itself, and there's better days ahead, and it's not terrible right now. If you think about the type of person that typically moves in a year, sells a property, buys a property, maybe both depending on the person, more often they're for personal reasons, human reasons, than investment reasons. You see the flippers and the renovation folks, the wholesalers, they can operate when there's variances in the market and a lot of good upside, and that's happening. But the real reason that people move are pretty everyday things. They need to upsize because they're having a baby, or they're getting married, or blending a family, or downsize because kids are going to college, or maybe families are getting divorced. It could be because someone has passed on, or there's an estate, or selling a beach house or a vacation property. They're moving across town, across the country. They're changing school districts for some specific course or reason, or sports or the like. These are the normal reasons that people move, and there's others, but they're everyday things. So as we look at what's going to drive this market ahead, and the end of 2023 and launching us into 2024, it's going to be those types of sales. The reasons that people typically move. And since we now know that the vast majority of homes and moves are predicated on those type of things, we'll begin to see some acceptance in this market of the conditions that are likely to be with us. So how do we survive, thrive in a market where the rates could be 7 or 8 or maybe even more? Well, I think it's pretty well documented over the last few months that sellers are more willing to take a look at offers that are below the asking price. I believe they're looking to look at government loans, FHA loans, and VA loans, so giving them a second look compared to just wanting cash or big down payments. I think there's a willingness of people to do owner financing right now if the properties are free and clear. and they can get above average interest rates, or they can collect the interest and not have to own the property and have a revenue stream. I see a lot of that going on. And I see a lot of people that are selling before the end of the year for tax purposes. Some are actually buying before the end of the year to maybe work on a tax strategy where they're moving out of equities and stock markets and things like that, and into real estate. So there's movement within real estate, and there's movement within money markets. And I think that we've seen over the last 100 or so years that ultimately real estate has been the best investment compared to anything, including the stock market. And again, that's likely to continue. And so when we look at through the lens of what are the opportunities in front of us, I do believe that there's a really good opportunity for someone who is in the early stages of wealth building strategies to actually keep the house that they're in, but not necessarily live in it. And I do believe that they could actually rent it out and have a pretty good profit above what the mortgage payment would be, especially if you're in that 2, 3, and 4% interest rate category. I don't know that you're going to be able to borrow money back in that quantity at that interest rate, maybe ever. And I would cling to those if it's possible. And having a renter in that property, if it's no longer the right size or the right property for you, would it make sense to have somebody continue to make those payments for you, even if it's just a year or two? And the reason behind that is whatever the mortgage payment is, a lot of it is going to the principal balance. It's knocking that balance down really fast because of the low interest rate. So building equity and more equity and probably some positive cash flow out of that, it just makes sense. And if the house that you're going to buy, even with a higher interest rate, is where you want to be, some of that profit off of your rental could go towards that mortgage payment. I think it's pretty simple. And because the mortgage balance is going down, you're still building equity. And that property that you might sell to go into the next one could absolutely help pay for the next one. I think you see home equity make a pretty good comeback right now, and not for the reasons, well, I mean, certainly for renovations to homes, but I believe that you could unlock equity in your home to later be used to purchase your next home, but keep it. And I believe your mortgage payment plus your home equity payment is going to be in the ballpark of what the rent's going to be on the property, even if you use a manager. But you unlock enough money to make the down payment on the next property. I think that's pretty smart. And if it gets you from 5% down to 10 or 20% down, and maybe get rid of the mortgage insurance, there's a big gain with doing that. But it helps you buy the property that you'd rather be in today to help you, your family, or your situation. And I think a lot of people are really looking at that at this time of year. Holidays always bring out the wishes and aspirations and visions of where we would like to be. Is this the year I get the beach house? Is this the year I get the big house I've wanted? Is this year I get the condo and get rid of all the maintenance? Which of those is the next thing, and how do you get there? Now, you absolutely could sell your property, take that cash, buy another property. But if you were going to do that, would it make sense to at least take a look at both sides of it? And if you're going to look at multiple properties to find the best one, would it make sense to look at multiple financial strategies in order to help you make the best possible decision? Because when you begin to add up the equity gained by a renter paying down your mortgage, knowing that rents are likely to go up over time, there'll be even more money coming in. And overall, when you eventually sell it down the road, there'll be a bigger profit at closing and off of payments that somebody else made to you. I just really think that if we visit upon that, it begins to make a lot more sense. And if you took the equity line out, and let's say that you're losing $100 a month figuratively, even though, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 is coming off the principal balance, you're actually ahead. But in cash flow, if you're off a little bit, in the next year or so, rents will probably normalize that to at least neutral, if not better. So I'd ask you just to think about it. And we'll spend some time going deeper on these strategies as we get towards the end of the year and into the next year, because this next generation of buyers coming in and next iteration of strategies is all going to be predicated on how can we win in a market where rates are higher, more than double what they were just a couple of years ago. And there's still a way to do it, and that's the optimistic piece right now. There's always a way to do it. There are good buys in every market, and there's reasons to keep properties for wealth building strategies. And with that said, sometimes it just makes sense to sell the property and cash out of it. And maybe there's a way through capital gains tax laws that you may not have to pay any tax on the property. It'd be really good. Maybe the taxes you might pay closing before December 31st might be less than if you close next year. Absolutely another reason to look just to cash out of the property. But what are you going to do next? I mean, having money in the bank at a couple of percent probably doesn't move the needle for you in the same way that it is just to keep the property. So you need the next strategy in front of you as well of how you are going to make the next move, whether it's real estate, precious metals, maybe it's stock market or something else that you want to invest in, maybe a small business. But everything's on the table right now. It's honestly just a really exciting time to be in the real estate space because there are far more options at this time than there has been in many, many years. We talked about a few earlier. Just about sellers willing to look at prices below the listing price. Maybe they'll help out with concessions for closing costs or doing some repairs, even putting a roof on that they wouldn't even think about doing. You might be able to have a contingency contract to put an offer on a house subject to the sale of your house. And those deals are now happening where they weren't in the last couple of years. There's a lot more options on the table. And as we come into this time of year, it's a good time to reflect upon what we might do next and how we might do it. All right, well, I hope this helped you with some year-end strategies and a little bit of a snapshot about what's different this year compared to last year and how we take that and use it to our advantage. All right, this is Ron Wysokarski signing off, saying it was really good spending time with you today on the Black Hole of Real Estate.